Hello again. Okay, same time, same place, but this is the Acts chapter 12 summary vlog. So if you haven't had a chance to read chapter 12 of the book of Acts, I encourage you to just kind of pause the video for just a second and read chapter 12. And I'm just going to give you kind of a summary and a highlight to kind of go along with that reading to give you a different perspective of chapter 12. So chapter 12 falls right behind what we learned as far as the church in Antioch, how it was growing, how that was the first place that Christians were, that's what they were called if they were followers of Jesus Christ. And so chapter 12 starts off with kind of a sad situation. We've already seen the stoning of Stephen as the first martyr, but keep in mind that Stephen was not one of the 12 disciples. He was an apostle. So James in chapter 12 in verse 2, this is the brother of John. He is the first disciple to actually be martyred for the faith in Jesus Christ. So we have Herod the king, and if that name sounds familiar, Herod is actually Herod Agrippa the first. He is the grandson of King Herod, who was reigning during the time of Jesus's birth. So that's why that name sounds familiar. So wow, how genealogy doesn't change, and we see this attack on the Christian faith continuing through this family name. So basically what happens in chapter 12 at the beginning is he puts James to death, and the people rejoice. And Herod sees how he becomes more popular. He's done something that makes people happy. So he's like, hey, that gives me an idea. Peter has been just causing a bit of a problem. Let's get Peter and let's put him to death too. And then that'll make everybody real happy. So after James has been martyred for the faith, Peter is arrested and put in prison. Okay, so basically that's what we see at the first part of the chapter. And then it says in verse 5, so Peter was kept in the prison, but prayer for him was being made fervently by the church to God. So there we see a key role of the church for their people. Prayer, the power of prayer. And then it goes on to say, verses 6 through really, on to, I guess, verse 11 maybe. Peter's sleeping, and we have a very detailed situation of the fact that he's got guards around him, he's got chains on him. I mean, it's like, okay, he is definitely incarcerated. This is not him lounging around at MetLife or whatever. No, he's in prison, in chains, surrounded by guards. All right, and then verse 7 just cracks me up, because it says, and behold, an angel of the Lord suddenly appeared, and a light shone in the cell, and he struck Peter's side. He's like, hey, dude, wake up, because Peter is asleep. So it says the angel of the Lord struck him in his side to wake him up and get his attention. And he roused him, saying, get up quickly. And then the chains fell off. And the angel said to him, gird yourself and put on your sandals. In other words, get dressed. Get your clothes on. We are getting out of Dodge. So get those clothes on. And he did so. And it says that the angel said, wrap your cloak around you and follow me. And he went out and continued to follow. And he did not know that what was being done by the angel was real. He thought this was like a trance, or just he was having a dream. He didn't realize that this was really happening. And when they had passed the first and second guard, they came to the iron gate, and it opened for them by itself. So God is making a way. He is redeeming his people. He is releasing his person from bondage. This is the power of God speaking through the angel, guiding through the angel, and then you also see God's power demonstrated. Wow, is that not awesome? So verse 11, it talks about how Peter came to himself and he said, "Now I know for sure that the Lord has sent forth his angel and rescued me from the hand of Herod and from all that the Jewish people were expecting." In other words, why would he say that? That they were expecting that he was going to be killed? Well, because James, the disciple, had just died, had been martyred for the faith. But let me just point something out here. If you take a minute and pause the video and look up John chapter 21, verse 15 through 18, you will see Jesus basically telling Peter that he is going to die an old man. Because he asks Peter 3 times, "Peter, do you love me?" And Peter says, "Yes, Lord, you know that I do." And so Jesus goes on to say, "Then feed my sheep. Then take care of my sheep." And in that passage in John chapter 21, verses 15 through 18, if you read through that, it shows that Jesus is telling Peter that he's going to live a long life. So at this point in time, the church may not be thinking that. They're focusing on the fact that James was just martyred for the faith, and now Peter's in jail, and it looks like he is going to get the same treatment. But Jesus had already prophesied that Peter is going to live a long life. Going on in chapter 12, we see that Peter shows up at the house of Mary, the mother of John, who is also called Mark, where many people would gather together and pray. And this is a house church. And it also said in the study Bible that this is probably the same location of where the Lord's Supper had taken place. So this is a place that is common to the church for them to get together and meet. And they've been praying for Peter there. So then we see just another humorous occurrence in Scripture when we see Rhoda. All right, it says, "And when he knocked at the door of the gate, a servant girl named Rhoda came to answer." And Rhoda, bless her heart, okay, she recognizes Peter's voice, but she gets so excited. She doesn't even open the door. She runs back and tells everybody, "Peter is on the other side of the door." So bless her heart, she got so excited she forgot to open the door and let him in. So Peter's just sitting there, hello, anybody there? I can just imagine Peter just standing on the other side of the door because he knew she was there, and then she's gone, and he's like, "Hello, where'd everybody go?" So when she goes back and she explains to the church, the group, that Peter's voice came through the door, that he's there, they're like, "Oh my goodness, you are crazy, girlfriend. Peter is not there. Peter is locked up in shackles in prison." So they really blew her off. And then you see in verse 16, it says, "But Peter continued knocking." Little persistent Peter, he did not give up. "And he said," when they opened the door, he was continuing to knock, and they opened the door and they saw him and they were amazed. But Peter motions to them to be quiet because he doesn't want to cause a commotion. He doesn't want the guards coming and arresting him and taking him away. So he explains to them how the Lord delivered him out of prison. He says, "Report these things to James and the brethren," and then he left and he went to another place. So it's really interesting how this is played out, and there's just so much humor in that, but yet also you see the power of God clearly demonstrated. So really the end of chapter 12 is about this horrid ending to Herod. So if you read through Herod is very upset that the guards let Peter just disappear. So they're punished for that. And then you see in verse 21, it says that he put on his royal apparel, took his seat on the rostrum, and he began delivering an address to them. And the people kept crying out, "Oh, the voice of God and not of a man." Okay, that's a big no-no, because if you give somebody else the credit and the glory of God himself, God is a just and a jealous God. And he tells us that in Scripture. So immediately it says in verse 23, an angel of the Lord struck him because he did not give God the glory. Now here's an interesting passage, and have you ever paid attention to what it says? So the angel of the Lord struck Herod, and he was eaten by worms. But look at the time lapse. It doesn't say he died and then he was eaten by worms. No, verse 23 clearly says he was eaten by worms and then he died. Oh, that's just, never thought about that before. I never noticed that part of the passage before. But I do want to just remind you that God is a jealous God. And he says in the 10 Commandments, "Thou shalt put no other God before me." For anybody that may be doubting, oh, well, that's just probably a dramatic rendition of what happened to Herod, let me just point out that there is historical documentation outside of the Bible that supports exactly what happened to Herod. It was written by Josephus. So if you're interested, go and check that out, because that it does validate and verify that what Scripture says is true. And I will say, the Bible is God's inerrant word. Perfect, timeless in its principles, has lots of drama, humor, history, and it's always applicable. So I hope you have enjoyed the summary of chapter 12, and I look forward to sharing with you chapter 13 next week.